Hey everyone, Tin Man here with a guide to some of the best builds in Dota Underlords after the patch on July 4th last week. This patch changed a lot of things in the game, and if you haven't caught up with all of them, make sure you check out my patch review video, linked below. Over the past few days, I've been recording a lot of data from the top players and in my games against other big boss and lord ranked players, and these 5 compositions are by far the most common ones to show up at the top of the standings. They are roughly in order of popularity, with both versions of Knights on top, followed by a sweet Hunter build, then Mages, and finally Assassins round out the top 5. Let's hop right in and take a look at each of them. First up, Trolls and Knights. This build uses a strong defensive alliance of Knights, along with a powerful damage output of 4 Trolls alliance to absolutely overwhelm opponents in the mid to late game. The Troll global item, Coordinated Assault, is amazingly good now that it was fixed in the patch, which has really moved this Troll synergy to the top of the meta. It definitely has some of the strongest late game potential, but it can be a bit weak until it assembles all 4 Trolls, with Troll Warlord being the most critical and rare unit. The other weakness is that it relies on being heavily stacked up, both for the Knights Alliance and the Coordinated Assault item. This leaves it a little bit weak to AoE effects, namely Kunkka and Enigma. Here we can take a look at the alliances that are present in this composition, and there are really just 4 that are normally present. The build prefers 6 Knights, but it can come online earlier with just 4, often by dropping Omni Knight and Dragon Knight. The Troll buff, on the other hand, is critical to get to 4 as soon as possible, as it represents a massive increase in damage output. The other buffs, Demon and Human, are really secondary and incidental to assembling the 6 Knights. If you're looking for an alternative or additional unit, the best option is Necrophos. He provides the Heartless and Warlock buff, along with Abaddon and Witch Doctor respectively, both of which are very strong in this build. His AoE healing is particularly nice with Knights, as their damage reduction increases the effective health gain from healing. The next meta composition, Dragon Knights, are remarkably similar to Troll Knights, just dropping the Trolls and adding a Dragon unit, either Puck or Viper. The main difference here is that it requires less units to come online, and more of the damage comes from Dragon Knight himself, rather than a strong damage output from everyone due to the Troll buff. This build can be spread out a bit more, so it's a bit less vulnerable to AoE effects, but it is now more weak to single target disables like from Doom or Slark if they hit Dragon Knight. The alliances once again start with 6 Knights and Demons and Humans, just like before, and the Dragon Alliance is more critical though, since you do need Dragon Knight to transform in order to get the massively increased damage output. A second Dragon can be either Puck or Viper. They don't really matter as much as that you have them, and they enable the 2 Dragon synergy. Even if they're not 2-star, you still want to play them just for the alliance. For additional units, we once again have Necrophos for many of the same reasons, but since we don't have Witch Doctor, another late game Warlock such as Alchemist or Enigma is preferred to round out this composition and complete the Warlock alliance. Next up, Hunters and Warriors. This 6 Hunter alliance makes Hunters do a ton of damage, and the 3 Warrior alliance provides a lot of defense to keep the Hunters safe. This build uses many of the most powerful individual units like Medusa, Tidehunter, Doom, and Kunkka, which make it very formidable in the late game. It can also be a threat early game though as well, since building just 3 Hunters can easily be done in the opening few rounds and provides a strong transition into the mid and late game. The weakness of this build is that it can really struggle against strong defenses like Knights, unless you get the Hunter global item, Hunter's Focus. And many of the most important units are 4 and 5 cost, which means you need to level up a lot and get a little bit of luck in order to get them all to 2-star. The alliances here start with the really obvious Hunter and Warrior alliance. There isn't really much flexibility here. You really do want the 6 Hunter alliance by the late game, and 3 is the minimum tier for Warriors. Scaled is really just a result of playing the best 2 Hunters, Medusa and Tidehunter, although if you're not playing against Mages, you can feel free to swap one of them out, although I still recommend them as they're so good individually. Heartless is very important for Hunters, since all of your damage comes from auto attacks, and reducing the opposing armor will dramatically increase your auto attack damage. One optional unit you can use is Mirana, who is the other Hunter that was not shown before, and she can replace any of the Hunters, but preferably Sniper, as he does not contribute to any of the other alliances, like Heartless or Scaled. If you choose to stick with Sniper though, and you want to go up to level 10, you may try Gyrocopter to complete the Deadeye buff. It's actually pretty strong, but it's rarely activated. In reality though, you probably want to just stay at level 9 and reroll to find your upgrades, and try to get some units to 3-star, rather than spending all that gold to level up 10 if you're just going to put in a unit like Gyrocopter. The next composition is Mages, who rely on powerful abilities to wipe out your opponent in a quick burst of damage. This is definitely the most flexible build of all the compositions discussed so far. While the core shows 8 units, you really only need the top row here: Razor, Crystal Maiden, Keeper of the Light, and Kunkka, and you're good to go with a solid 3 mage core. I think this particular build is very powerful, as the additional mages further reduce the opponent's magic resistance, and the power of Dragon Knight, discussed earlier, is a good backup plan whose damage complements your other AoE spells quite well. The alliances here are mainly focused on the mages and dragons, while humans are somewhat secondary and incidental since so many of the mages are humans. For additional units, you can use Gyrocopter, who provides a ton of magic damage, or Shadow Fiend, who provides the demon buff along with a lot of magic damage as well. You can also consider Disruptor, whose ability will silence opponents, giving your units time to gain mana for their spells. It also deals a respectable amount of magic damage, and along with the Shadow Fiend, you get the Warlock buff, which is a bit more desirable in mages after the rework. As mentioned before, there are some 3 mage compositions that do work well, and if you have all of these units, feel free to drop down to 3 mages just to fit them all in. The final composition to discuss is a bit less popular than the previous 4, but it still shows up quite a bit in big boss lobbies. Assassins rely on powerful critical strikes to quickly burst down opponent units' backline before they can put up a fight. This particular build uses the most powerful assassins in the game, along with 2 druids to tank up front and keep attention away from the assassins. The 3 that we're not using, Bounty Hunter, Bloodseeker, and Viper, are just a little bit too weak in the late game, but are perfectly fine early on, and can provide you with a strong early game to transition, just like with the Hunter build. The alliances here start with the namesake 6 assassins and 3 elusive. Going up to 9 assassins is generally not correct, mainly because of how weak the additional 3 assassins are, and dropping to 3 really reduces your damage output. The Druid Alliance plays a key role in providing some resilience on the front line from Treant Protector and Lone Druid. Sand King, on the other hand, who completes the Savage Alliance, also provides nice stun, which is good for assassins who generally lack some CC effects compared to the previous compositions. The main downside of assassins, though, is the fact that they are relatively weak once you get to the really late game, and you don't have too many great additional unit options. Tidehunter and Medusa are fine if you're up against mages and you need the extra magic resistance, while Enigma and Tiny are good for some AoE effects. But this build really peaks in the mid-game and falls off later as other players start to get up to level 9 and 10. If you do not need one of these buffs, like Scaled against mages, it's often better to just stay at level 8 and try to reroll a whole lot to get 3-star units. So that does it for the meta compositions, but just a few more notes after the patch. While Warlocks were reworked, I found them to be terribly overrated. Not many players have found success by playing 4 or 6 Warlock builds up in the Big Boss and Lord ranked lobbies. They are often best left as a secondary synergy in addition to things like Warriors or Knights. Demon Hunters, on the other hand, were also buffed in the last patch, which has made them a bit more popular. Demon Hunters can be strong, but also terribly inconsistent. Since there are a lot of 1st and 2nd places, but there's also a lot of 7th and 8th places with Demon Hunters, with little in between. They also are heavily reliant on their global item, Strange Bedfellows, in the opening few rounds, which make them even more inconsistent. I really did want to include them on this list, but I'd like to see a little bit better results from them before they get moved into the top of the meta. The final note is that Medusa is still OP. She was great even before the patch, but now that her split shot applies item effects to all targets, she got even crazier. This works with things like Eye of Scotty, Skullbasher, even Maelstrom and Blightstone. So yeah, Medusa's great. Pick her up, play her as much as you possibly can. She's amazing. So that does it for this meta report. I hope you found this useful. Please do like and subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. And you can also support me on Patreon if you want content like this to keep on improving. Also, let me know what kind of Patreon benefits you'd be interested in. I am taking all ideas. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.